So I have my sewing box back out again because after making my What's in My Sewing Box video, I actually had quite a few comments asking about making my tray. My box didn't originally come with a tray, I had to make it. And I made it out of cardboard and paper and then filled it with the things that I like the most. So I thought I would show you how to make a tray the way I did. But in order to do that, you have to have your collection of things that you want to put into it. So I thought maybe before then, I would show you how to recreate a couple things that I have. I have a needle book, I have spool holders, I already have a tutorial on making interesting pin cushions out of kind of random things. So anyway, today I thought I would make a video about how to recreate antique spool holders. Now you can get spool holders, like original antique ones. They're not that hard to find. They might be kind of expensive. They could range between like $30 to maybe upwards of $100 a piece. And then if you want like a complete set that matches, it's going to be even more. But you could also make them. And so I'm going to show you a couple different ways that I have made spool holders for my sewing box. I hope you enjoy it. So spool holders are really cool. They don't really have much of a modern equivalent. You know, antique scissors, we still have little scissors, and the thread themselves still come on little spools, and we have spools of thread. And we have old antique measuring tapes and new modern measuring tapes. But the idea of a spool holder just kind of disappeared. So they come in lots of different shapes and sizes. My favorite ones are made out of shell, but they also come in bone and ivory and wood and a whole lot of different materials. The oldest ones have a screw attachment where the top just kind of screws into the bottom. This one also has a screw post where it just kind of screws into the bottom there. Originally, like the oldest ones, you would take this down to your merchant and they would wind whatever amount of string or thread that you had purchased onto your spool. But then before too long, you just purchased your spool and put the whole spool and everything into your little cover. These smaller ones are tension fit. So they have a tube here and a post there. And then you just sleeve them together to fit whatever height of spool you have. And they're available. You can find them at antique stores or, you know, eBay and Etsy and all those guys. But for the sake of DIY and historical inspiration and all those kinds of things, I thought I would show you a couple of different ways I have come up with. Some are a little more historically accurate than others, but they all work for me, and they're all ways that I still use in my sewing boxes now. So the first one that I'll do is this one. This one I think captures the look very well, but it has nothing to do with a spool holder. It's actually an antique button. So this is a shank button. It has a fairly large shank. I did have to kind of squeeze it closed just a tiny bit to get it to fit, but not much. And it just tension fits right into the top of the spool. And honestly, I really like this button. It is an antique button, and it fits in with my spool holders really well. So it's about the same age as the spool holders. It just wasn't originally created as a spool holder, but I like it as part of my set. Another kind of spool holder that uses old buttons are these. These are also made with antique buttons. They're some of my favorite buttons. I really like them, and I didn't want to glue them or cut them or anything like that. So I have them just on with elastic. So this is the top, and then the bottom is just a more modern button. I don't know, it might be a vintage button, but and so it's held on with elastic. So what I've made is I got a ring with a little break in it. You could use wire, but you can't have it be soft enough that the tension from the elastic will make it unbend. So this is just a ring and it's nice and sturdy, and I just kind of ovaled it and then opened it up a little bit so it'll still grab the elastic. And then I just tied a piece of elastic around the shank of this button here. And that way, if I ever did want to use these for something else, I don't have an irreversible thing done to them. So in order to put them on, I just grab a crochet hook, get a hold of the elastic, and then hook the bottom part in. And then the entire thing is just kind of held on there. And so you get spool holders that aren't historically accurate, but are pretty cool because they're made with old buttons and they look beautiful. And I get to see my cool buttons all the time. Then the last way, I think the last way is kind of more historically accurate-ish. At least they look more like spool holders. And they kind of look more like these that has the screw on them. Or maybe these here. Double as a bird call. So you've got threaded on this side and then interior threaded on that side. And they screw together. So at our hardware store we found these, and they're called, what are they called? They're called binding posts. And they had a bunch of them, and they were not very expensive. And you can get them in 2 different sizes. You can also get little extensions for them. So if you were making something for like a tall Gutermann thread, this size, I think this size fits okay. Yeah, so this taller size, which is, how tall is that? It's like a 2-inch or 5 centimeters, 50 millimeters. Will fit a tall Gutermann thread or a tall Coats & Clark. See, that lines up pretty well. The short ones work in the Coats & Clark really well. With an extension on, they'll fit the larger coats really well. And then I think you have to have 2 extensions on to fit a Gutermann. Yeah, so 2 extensions would fit a Gutermann. I do suggest getting the short ones and a bunch of extensions. That way you can use little ones or big ones or whatever you want. And you're not limited to just the bigger size unless you only have the bigger size, in which case they do make bigger ones. So anyway, at our hardware store, these are the 2 sizes that they had. And they screw apart. So you have one side and then the other side. And just like with this, it's got an interior thread and an exterior thread. And then these, so I found these on Etsy. And I can't remember exactly how I searched for them. I think I searched for like 1-inch shell medallion, something like that. Of course, you can make like 2-inch if you want to make ones that will fit like really giant spools of thread. You could get 1/2 inch if you wanted to make them all for very small spools of thread. But most of my thread is this Coats & Clark dual duty thread, and it's pretty standard, I guess. And so these fit very well on the top. If you have like old spools, then you're looking at kind of the same thing. That fits pretty nicely. And it doesn't look bad on that size either. So the 1-inch seems to work pretty well for me. But again, you know, see what you can find and see what you like. And that's the cool thing about making stuff yourself, is that it gets to be completely customizable to what you want to make out of it. So we tried lots of different adhesives. We tried super glue, we tried E6000 jewelry, we tried like aquarium glass adhesive, we tried the putty Bondo stuff that you mix together. And the best thing that we found was the first thing we tried, and that was just plain old E6000. E6000 is a really, really good crafting, making glue. The difficulty is that you're trying to glue like aluminum, which is fairly smooth, to the back of shell, and shell is really smooth. It's very hard to get stuff to stick to shell. So I took a file and I just kind of roughed it up a little bit more and tried to make something for the glue to hold on to. I think I tried with the shell, but it was really hard. Yeah, it doesn't really show up very well. Filing shell is not really recommended because you don't want to breathe in the dust. It can be really toxic. So if you're going to file shell, do a little research and figure out how to do it safely. I didn't find that it made a huge amount of difference with how much I filed it. But anyway, so this isn't a bulletproof method. The E6000 holds on to it the best, but you could still pop it off if you tried. If you get antiques, you want to be delicate with them anyway. So you still have to be kind of delicate with these, but they will take a little more abuse. And if the top comes off, you can always just reglue it. So you're going to hold on to your post, and like you're making a rose for cake decorating or anything, you're just going to kind of push on some glue. You're trying to get all the little nooks and crannies filled with no air bubbles in between the post and the glue. And grab your shell, and I just kind of spin it onto it. Because again, you want to try and keep it as smooth as possible. And now you need to center it. You need to center it this way and then also this way. It holds pretty well. And just kind of get it worked in. You can press a little bit. And so that looks pretty good. Yeah, I think that's pretty centered. Okay, so then just put it down. Try your next one. And just kind of push it on, press it on, so that there isn't a lot of air bubbles, but that you do have a fair amount of glue. Center it circle-wise. Center it this way. And once you have it the way you like it, leave it alone for at least a day, maybe 2 or 3 days. You want your glue to be so incredibly set because it's already going to be a little fragile just because the shell is so smooth. And then after it's cured, you'll end up with one of these, which, like I said, is not perfect. It's not made out of bone. They really didn't do anything out of aluminum in the early 1800s, or at least not this kind of stuff. But it is very close. And if you're making a reproduction sewing box, that is awfully close. It looks good in the spools. So if I have an old spool of thread, put it on like that. And once you get it on, you're not really going to see the metal very much anyway. And you end up with something that looks an awful lot like the original, especially when it's filled. Now, I use the decorative on both sides. You can always get a flat one if you want to try and match these ones. But there were original ones that had decorative on both sides too. It's just kind of a question of what you want. But yeah, so this one, like I said, is probably the most historically accurate, at least in mechanics. It works the same way as these do. And it looks very, very similar to an original when you have it on the spool. So those are 3 of my ways that I like to reproduce the look or the feel of having an antique spool holder. I do like my original antique ones, but it is a nice way to showcase my favorite antique buttons, and then also to be able to have ones that kind of work and feel like the original ones. So I hope you found that helpful or perhaps inspirational, and let me know if you do make them. If you have an Instagram account, you could tag me on there. I would love to see what you end up making. And thank you for coming to watch my little video on spool holders. See you next time. Bye.